It's worth pointing out Poland was the first country to deliver Leopard tanks to Ukraine before others followed. Now it's the first to send warplanes. Slovakia already following. The question, how many other allies of Ukraine will also follow suit? To discuss, I'm joined on the set by our foreign editor, Rob Parsons. Hello to you, Rob. Let's begin, first of all, with what Warsaw has agreed to do.
Well, initially it's 4 MiG-29s with the promise of, I think it's another eight to follow. Worth bearing in mind, actually, too, that Poland was prepared to do this a year ago, had suggested it and asked that its MiG-29s be replaced with backup from the United States with presumably F-16s. The United States at the time said no, because it was worried about provoking the Russians. So the Russians might be tempted to think that this was a step too far by NATO and could involve the two clashing together. It shows you, in other words, how much has changed in a year, that the only response we're getting for the Russians at the moment is not, oh, this is bringing NATO even closer into the possibility of conflict with us, but it's saying these planes will not make any difference at all. They're going to get shot down by the Russian Air Force. To go back to your question, I think 12, at least initially. Poland has 28. These are MiG-29s that were firmly in service with East Germany before the collapse of the Berlin Wall. They were taken over by the Poles in the 90s. The MiG-29 is an aircraft that's been in service initially with the Soviet Union from 1983. So a pretty old aircraft, but serviceable nonetheless, and used also by the Russian Air Force. The Ukrainians will be very happy to have them. They have a big disadvantage in terms of number of aircraft with the Russians. At the beginning of the conflict, the Russians had over 1,500. Ukraine had about 120, I think. A lot have been shot down on both sides or destroyed in one way or another. So it will help. But I think the other thing to bear in mind about the aircraft is that neither side has managed to get air superiority in this conflict, which shows you that despite that preponderance in Russian aircraft, it's not actually aircraft that's making all the difference at the moment. It's the air defense systems which are dominant. So, one has to ask, one can understand for the Ukrainians in terms of morale, it'll be great for them to get them. But in actual practical terms, is it going to make an awful lot of difference? Wouldn't it be better for the Ukrainians, perhaps, to get even more air defense? These are certainly questions that have been put to the Ukrainians themselves, I think. The Russian response is interesting, but it's also worth bearing in mind, sort of looking back in history on this, in terms of precedent. The Soviet Union provided Vietnam with MiG-17s and MiG-21s during the Vietnam War, and the United States didn't see that as a provocation which would lead to conflict between the Soviet Union and the United States. And those MiGs shot down a lot of American planes.
Rob, well, tell us, will this make any difference in terms of the provision of high-end weaponry in Ukraine?
Yeah, this is the question, I think, although I wonder whether it should be the question at the moment, because we're talking about a possible counteroffensive by the Ukrainians in the late spring, early summer, so the end of May, beginning of June. If it's F-16s that the Ukrainians are worried about, there's no way that they're going to have F-16s ready for that counteroffensive. The training on an F-16 takes months at the very least. You have to have a lot of engineering backup, spare parts. It's not even clear that Ukraine has the runways to allow F-16s to take off. So even if, as a consequence of this step taken by NATO, this sort of crossing the Rubicon with fighter aircraft, even if others were to now say, okay, and some countries have been talking about it, Poland itself, Finland, the Netherlands, possibility of supplying F-16s. In terms of that counteroffensive, it won't make a scrap of difference. Yes, getting more MiGs now probably would help a little bit, but the important thing, I think, for Ukraine at the moment is making sure they've got plenty of armour, and in other words, those Leopard tanks are still very important, and Poland played the key role in that, but also long-range artillery and howitzers and air defences.
All right, Rob, thank you very much. Rob Parsons, France 24's chief foreign editor.